You're listening to Honey, We Made a Disney Podcast. Two friends since first grade, now dads reliving the Disney movies we grew up on with our own kids. I'm JB Waggoner.
And I'm Eddie Ferguson. And on today's episode, there ain't no mountain high enough as we review Remember the Titans. But first, JB, how are you and the family doing?
Most of us are okay, but we had a big injury, if you will say, today.
Oh.
And a first-time thing. We were over at...
actual big injury, or was this like a toddler thinks
it's
that's
still,
a big
like,
injury?
if this thing happened to me, I would also be a little upset. I don't know if we'd be recording right now. Maybe my leg would probably be propped up or something. But we went over to my mother-in-law's house for her rental house where she was fixing that up to put that on the market. And we were just playing around, and we brought the kids over there. And right as we're about to leave, we're like, okay, let's go outside and play. They wanted to play outside for a little bit, so yeah, outside the house. And my son's just running around, and then all of a sudden he starts like yelling, screaming, like, my leg, my leg, my leg. And at first we think it's like a scrape or something like that. It's like, oh no, we pulled over. But then we look down, and it's like a perfect circle. It's like a perfect little indentation right there. And we realized that he had gotten stung by a wasp.
Oh,
First time. I don't know how you remember getting stung by anything when you were little.
It's bad. Yeah.
It was almost horrific. It was like...
You are convinced they are going to have to chop this thing off.
Yeah.
There's just no way I can live. Yeah.
First time he's experienced anything with this amount of pain before. Like, I even thinking in my head, like, he's scraped and he's got like, but this is like prolonged. It takes a while. So we're at the house. There's nothing to help salve it or anything like that. So we're like trying to put stuff on it, and it was crazy. But he finally calmed down. I think he's now in bed now. But the first thing, Eddie, do you remember what memory this triggered for me? From our
when you got bees stuck in your pants at recess in first grade.
Yep.
And I just distinctly remember you like crying outside our classroom because you couldn't get them out.
Not specifically. So specifically, the memory is then me having to go into the bathroom stall and stand on the toilet with my pants on the ground. So I told him that story, and it made him feel a little bit better, and he chuckled a little bit. That's how I kind of soothed him a little bit to make him feel a little bit better. But I knew you would remember that story. I was like,
I do. First
grade, man, that was all the feels. But enough about me. Here's something interesting to share with you this week. So one story that just came out last week was evidently there's been some unrest for all the visual effects artists that have been working on some of the Marvel films recently. There's a subreddit, VFX subreddit, that people have been kind of venting their frustrations on there. A lot of people kind of telling not crazy horror stories, not like sweatshop things, but just like crazy expectations, constantly changing things that they were being required to do, coming in at the last moment, using all of their energies, like half the work time that they've been allotted for things that never really even made it because they then changed their mind on it. And it's just really unfortunate that that's now becoming Marvel's, at least in this sphere, their personal brand now is kind of being tarnished by these just like bad review. Not that these people aren't right, but like that is the story coming out of the visual effects world that's happening right now in relation to Marvel products right now.
Yeah, and it looks like what they just try and throw more money at it. And then they also know, okay, if a VFX house wants to kind of have a good resume, you got to have a Marvel film on your resume. Like you got to get kind of that star power on there. But yeah, there's that line where you cross it when you think you're too big and too powerful, and you can pretty much ask people to do whatever you want unrealistically. But yeah, it is a little crazy. I mean, the more and more, I don't know if I didn't feel this as much with Thor, but I definitely felt it with Doctor Strange, where you just feel so much VFX coming at you.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the reason why people love Top Gun so much is everything you're looking at is real.
He's literally flying the plane.
Yes, they all are, and and it really it makes a difference. I wonder if I don't know. I wonder, is there ever a tipping point with just the obscene use of VFX? Is there a saturation point where you're just kind of like, okay?
Well, I'll tell you this. I know that you know this because Miss Marvel was your favorite of all the series that you watched. If you haven't heard Eddie's comments,
absolutely favorite.
Listen to last episode if you didn't already know this. But it's funny because that show, the final episode in it, there's a whole scenario that like Home Alone style scenario that happens in a high school in that last episode. And it's actually a ton of fun. I finally watched the final episode. That whole stuff was a ton of fun. And there are lots and lots of practical jokes and things played on these agents. And then they leave the building and then they go out into the front area, kind of exposed, like so that now the agents can find them. And it then goes super visual effects heavy. And it's like, I would much rather go back to that. I would much rather be in this world. But in general, the special effects on most of these Marvel shows have been really subpar, especially once you go from like when we watched all those initial series that came out. Then we got Black Widow and you're like, oh, this is what really good special effects looks like. And so it is funny that saturation point you're talking about, how when we spend all this time trying to make something really cool, when at the time, like actually practical stuff actually looks a lot better. And it actually looks real.
Well, and I think you also have that element where Black Widow, it's weird to say this, but it felt more grounded in reality. It's visual effects. And then you go to Doctor Strange and you go to Thor and you're not playing by the rules of physics and the rules of reality. And so the visual effects almost work less. There's definitely some times in Black Widow where you're like, I don't know. But because it's playing by the general rules of reality of nature, you kind of, your brain starts to believe it and make sense a little bit more. There's something where it's so out there. Yeah, it feels weird.
Because they're inventing things that don't actually exist and they're taking it. The only places where they actually exist are in comic books, which weren't designed to look real. They were meant to be fantastic and crazy. And now they're having to change that and manipulate it. And I know they had to do a lot for Miss Marvel because they didn't want to do the whole stretchy feel. They had to create this new crystal thing. But yeah, I think we've definitely hit a saturation point, but we're definitely hitting an inflection point with the people working on it, getting a lot of vibes from 2013 with all the chroma green that people were putting on their profiles and stuff as they were kind of boycotting Oscars at that time because they were mad about a big production house, Rhythm and Hughes, went under while they were up for a Best Picture for VFX, and while that picture Life of Pi was up, and there's a lot of stuff. So I'm getting kind of sense of that right now, but I don't think it's really hit a boiling point. This is like the first wave of stuff we're kind of hearing about. So.
Yeah, and sadly, this isn't the first time Disney has thrown its weight. It did some things like this in its picture distribution as well, just its distribution arm, where unless, I think it was the last big one I heard a kerfuffle over was Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, that they put on theaters that if they didn't play it on so many screens, so many times a day, they weren't even going to let them have it at all.
Yeah.
And what it was doing is it was pushing out other movies so that other movies couldn't even be in the same theater as Star Wars. And so they start kind of, throwing that muscle around a little bit. And I don't know, just I don't know. I don't like, throwing around the muscle just because you can, or throwing around the money just because you can.
Well, another way that they threw on the muscle is by not informing all
this
parties.
This is hilarious.
I know this is funny. So another kind of funny thing interesting thing that just happened is, so Taika Waititi, the director of Thor, Love and Thunder, went to a screening or whatever, one of the first ending screenings of the movie with Chris Hemsworth, and in the in the ending credits, spoiler alert, it says the thing that we all kind of wait for at the end of the film is will we actually see this character again? And it says Thor will return. And evidently, he was not privy to this information and said something to the effect of like, according
Taika or Chris Hemsworth.
Do you think you'd probably like give him kind of a heads up, like maybe this is kind of coming or something?
I could maybe understand the director not knowing, but the guy who actually plays Thor.
Yeah. He said,
I love. Yeah, please read the quote. I love what he says in Insider.
Yeah, so Insider.com has this story, and it says, well, guess what? That was a surprise to me. So I'm not joking. I saw it in the theater and was like, oh, really? Even Chris was like, what? But of course, he'll be back. He's the best character. I mean, I may be a little biased, but he's the most fun to watch. And then he goes on to say, hey, I'd be interested in doing a fifth film. He said the battles are all the fighting is fine, but I would want something that feels unexpected when it comes to the story, which is funny because that's what he does, is he just creates an unexpected story in the things he chooses to do. So he's almost like saying, I just did something and now I want to go against that, even if I did a fifth Thor film. So I don't know if I'm really wanting that at this point.
I don't know if I really want it. I'm intrigued by that concept, though. It's kind of similar to what we were talking about with Jurassic World, where you can only have so much of everything's about to end. You know, oh, the world's going to be over. The world's going to be over. The world's going to be over. I mean, one of the things that was great about the first few runs of the Marvel movies is everything felt smaller scale.
Yep.
You know, you think about that first, I mean, even the first Thor, it was pretty grandioso, but it was just like this thing came to this small town in New Mexico. Okay.
Yeah, isolated.
You know, especially Iron Man. Iron Man felt just kind of like a very intimate story. I would love to see some of that kind of pull back. Give us I don't know, a very small scale thing.
Black Panther, I felt the same thing. Even though they're kind of on the verge of taking over, it definitely felt more, especially when he like gets rid of his powers. That's why I love so much about it, because it felt like there were real stakes involved, and not like crazy stakes, but just like, no, this person can die. They're literally giving up their powers right now to assume the throne. Yeah. But I just thought this story was funny, that just imagining a director who just made this film and then the studio puts in that last little piece of Thor will return. And it's just like, you didn't give them any heads up whatsoever. Just like, oh, I guess it's happening. And you're looking at your star right now, who's the reason this film got made.
Well, does that speak to, you know, last week we reviewed Thor, and I think we went through all of the Phase 4 MCU, and I think our number one critique has been just doesn't feel like we know where they're going. It doesn't feel like they're building to something.
Keeping their cards tight to their chest.
Yeah, because that's what made those first two phases feel so good. Is you had these small, intimate stories, but you knew that they were connecting to something else bigger. You were holding the big for, you know, these big Avenger set piece movies. You know, maybe this kind of plays into that a little bit. You know, do they even know where they're going and what they're doing? Or are they just trying to throw some stuff out there, build a new palette, and then they'll come around to it?
Seems like Ant-Man 3 is going to be where they're going to reveal the next big major villain, and like where this is all going, with potentially bringing in Kang the Conqueror finally. And at that point, it seems like it's kind of pointed towards that. So that's in February, I believe, of next year. 2023 is when we'll kind of get that. But I'm super excited about that. But this is just a funny. I just really loved the whole. I can just see them sitting in the theater and just being like dropping the popcorn, like, what?
Did you know that? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. But that's it. That's all the interesting things for today. We are going to be talking now about a movie, classic film, iconic film, big sports hero. Eddie's a big sports balls guy, so he's very excited about this as well. But we are here to talk today about the 2000 classic, Remember the Titans.
Cue the Disney sound effect.
Sports balls. Okay. IMDb description for Remember the Titans. The true story of a newly appointed African-American coach and his high school team on their first season as a racially integrated unit. A little bit of drama there. A little bit of drama. Eddie, do you remember where you were when you first saw this film? Because I do.
I don't know if I do. I can't remember. I don't think we saw this in theaters. I think this was like a pick it up at Blockbuster, have a family movie night, and was an instant classic in the Ferguson household. Yeah. I also remember seeing clips being used as, do you remember this as like sermon illustrations in youth group?
This thing got so, it went to another place immediately. It was the same effect that we got from The Blind Side, like a decade later. This was the precursor. I don't know if there was, it must have been like Chariots of Fire, nothing than this. Like that's what it felt like when this came on the scene for me.
So let me hear this.
So where I first saw it, I'm pretty sure this is true if I remember correctly. If I'm making this up, you'll never know. But back in the day, Eddie, do you remember what my job was in junior high? You
used to wash and clean buses for your grandpa.
After that. So this is after that. So I only 1 year was able to make the basketball team as a basketball player. So what I did to just be around, because all my friends were on the team, I was the manager.
Oh, yes.
Manager of the team.
That's what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. You said job, so I was thinking money, but yeah.
You're right. It wasn't a real job. It was a fake job, but it got me on the team and it got me to go to all the places and be there with my friends. But anyways, so I did that many years other than sixth grade was the 1 year. 1 year I was able to do it, be on the team. But so 2001 or 2002, when I was the manager on the team, about a year after this movie came out, I was they had the whole basketball team over to somebody's house, one of the coach's house, and we watched it all together. It was like a team bonding experience and big ordeal. I remember, and it was like this big moment and stuff. Everyone loved the film, but it was like learn about leadership and all these other things. So that was what's ingrained in my head, is being in that room with all these other people that were actually good at basketball and I was not. So
watching a movie about football.
About football. You know what? It's universal. Sports ball movies, they're all universal. So
is this I can't think of another Disney sports movie. Is there one before this? I mean, definitely after Remember the Titans, it was like, we need to duplicate that model, right? Because after this is when we get everything.
Coach Carter, the hockey film, the hockey Miracle.
You get The Rookie. The Rookie is a big one that comes out next after this one. And a couple others along those lines. And then, I mean, ever since then, they're been churning out one every 2 to 3 years. But before Remember the Titans, I can't. One that's a drama and serious, I can't think of. You've got your Air Buds, but you got your Angels in the outfield.
That's what I'm saying. I don't have a sports movie memory that was on this level where like it was obviously supposed to be inspirational, supposed to be kind of like
that's
bringing
Disney.
Us all together. Especially Disney. Yeah, you're right. From the Disney perspective.
Well, let's be honest. We both grew up in Indiana, so there are two untouchable sports movies for those who grow up in Indiana. Number one, by far, is Hoosiers.
Yep.
Might be the best sports movie ever made.
Yep.
My number two, it gets very close to it. But I know, at least from where we're from in Indiana, there was people in our church who were in Hoosiers. Hoosiers was filmed in Brownsburg at the old stadium, the old gymnasium there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my childhood somebody would be like, they filmed Hoosiers right over there on that corner. It's
really?
like, oh, really? Idea. Okay. So yeah, Hoosiers is like untouchable to us Hoosiers. And then on par, it's got to be on par, right? Is Rudy.
Ooh,
to me,
Rudy,
like,
yeah.
Rudy is the best football movie. Like, there's no better football. I love Remember the Titans. I'm gonna be gushing over it this whole episode. But Rudy is just one. It's Sean Astin. I'm gonna love Sean Astin.
I was about to say, there's got to be but Sean Astin is the reason I can see for you.
For sure, but like, come on, it's Sean Astin. He's untouchable. The Goonies, Rudy, Lord of the Rings, Bob. Arguably the best character in all of Stranger Things.
I don't know, the Russian guy, not the full Russian guy, but the investigative reporter. He kind of really rocketed.
Oh yes,
up the charts.
This last season too. So we come to Remember the Titans, and they found a formula here, right? I think at the top of the formula is they found powerhouse actors. Like Denzel is Denzel in this movie.
Is this movie nearly as good without him, though?
No, it's not.
He takes it to another place, right?
And I mean, you have that with all the characters. I mean, there are some really good actors in this movie, but by far, yes, it is Denzel Washington who holds this movie. But you get a very young Ryan Gosling in this movie.
Oh yeah, he's like the 10th
Wood
player.
Harris, Will Patton, a young Hayden Panettiere is in this movie.
Kate Bosworth is a very minor character in this, and then she goes on to be in some Superman films.
So
you remember Ethan Suplee from all like that that large guy, and what's crazy is now he's lost like 200 pounds or something, and is now like a bodybuilder and has a whole new career now in what he's doing. We also got Donald Faison from Scrubs is in this as well, and just a lot of guys that you've obviously seen before. And you just haven't seen Will Patton as Coach Bill Yost. But yeah, I mean, you can't talk about any of those without first talking about the work of Denzel Washington in this film, which definitely you need that extra level star power to get it to be so iconic as it became.
Well, I mean, to have a good sports movie, you have to have at least one, if not multiple, incredible, like almost Shakespearean coach speech.
Yep.
You need the speech from the coach that feels like it is lifted straight from the pen of the bard himself. And this movie has a few, several. Will Patton has a few as Coach Yost, but definitely Denzel's got several, like
this is
his speech about the Titans ruling their universe, and this is our universe. Like that whole moment.
This is no democracy. This is dictatorship, and I'm the law.
Who's your daddy?
Who's
your daddy?
You know who your daddy is, don't you?
Jared,
who's your daddy?
If you want to play on this team, you got to tell me.
Is this your team or your daddy's team?
But I think in the moment that turns, that I don't think anybody else could have pulled this off, is when they're at camp, they go for the early morning run.
Oh yeah.
And he's winded, and they get to the graveyard of Gettysburg, and there's the mist, and he's kind of speaking with a little bit of, he's out of breath from the run, and he just gives this most it's so moving. Like, it's beautifully written. It's a wonderful scene and a great script, but the delivery, because you could easily over deliver that scene. You could easily over dramatize that. And he just slides it in on just such a perfect level where it hits even more. Like, I don't need you to oversell this. Just the whole imagery that just got painted is enough. But then he just kind of taps it over just perfectly enough that man, it's just that's probably one of my top 5 favorite scenes in this.
So we got to talk about his coaching style, or his the way that he coaches. That is probably the most. It's funny. It's like this movie is heavy on a lot of serious topics, which I'm sure we'll get to here in a second. But it's funny is the thing that popped out to me as the thing that does not age well in this is the types of camps he ran and what you aren't allowed to do for the players when you're training them and stuff like that.
You mean you can't withhold water from them?
Water from them, like these are all things that they like made. I don't know, not outlawed isn't the right word for it, but like basically forced them that like you literally can't do this to kids. Like these are still kids.
Like
there's so many laws and rules. You can't do this for adults anymore. Even like there's rules about two-a-days.
Heat stroke is a real thing. Heat stroke will, actually kill you.
Now, wolves don't eat. Wolves coming after humans is not a real thing. But heat stroke, that's a real thing.
It's been a while since we've called that one up.
But. So it was just funny watching this. Like his whole approach to coaching would not. There's no way that even any player nowadays would ever take him seriously. But in the moment when you're in there and you're thinking about this being more of a period piece and stuff, like you're back in those times, like you get it, you follow it, you see that's just the way things were back then. So it's just funny watching that, going like, none of this is, they wouldn't do any of this in the modern day coaching. It's funny.
It is fun to watch the camp sequence because you get I don't know. I appreciated the talking about a difficult subject, talking about an important subject, but it never felt preachy. Yep. It never felt like you were like. And so much of that because it was driven by good story. It was driven by great character. And that camp sequence in particular, you just learned this beautiful lesson of getting to know who the person is, not what you think the person is.
Yep.
And you have just some really comical, some really heartfelt moments. And that moment that you feel Julius and Jerry bonding, and when you realize, boom, they've just become friends. It is
best friends.
Yeah, it's an emotional moment. It is a very kind. I think that's what surprised me about rewatching this. I suffer from sweaty eye syndrome to begin with. But this movie, there are several moments where it's not like, oh, I'm bawling my eyes out or whatever, but it like, you just kind of feel that frog in your throat kind of thing. I don't know if you felt this at all.
The first time
it definitely moves you.
The first time he says strong side, and there's like that weight, and like that in between part. And he's like, and then he goes, and then they go into it, and they're just going back and forth. That was left side, strong side, left side, strong. But then, oh man, it pays off so beautifully when they go into the hospital, and he does it again, and it's just like I'm almost weeping right now. It was so.
You nailed it straight on the head with that one. It is such a strong moment. Even, all of the beats through the different games, they do gameplay so well. And I think that's what is important here in a sports film is you need to
believably looking like they're actually playing football.
You need to believably feel like they're watching football. And you need to help me feel like I'm watching a whole game without me watching just the highlight reels.
Yep.
And they just the pacing of those moments in this film are so good, are so well done. And I would give that over to editing. I don't know who edited this movie, but they just make such great choices in how they pace the editing and give us some pausing, give us some moments, and then, speed it up and we get the, the different cuts and the moving around of pieces.
It's not like we don't get brought into every game at the very end. It's like, okay, here's just the big moment you need to know. It's like they got some ups, they got some downs, they got some plays that go their way, don't go their way. It feels very natural and not, okay, we're just going to give you how we blew them out and then we went on. It's like there was a little bit of tug and tussle. We have a new coach that you think is, this is the really bad coach, but he's not even the worst one, or not worst, but the hardest one of them all. Then you get kind of different looks at it. They have different moments inside of the game, whether it's PD getting pulled from the game or coming in on defense, and then you get the back and forth.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed.
That's a great. Sorry. I was going to say, like, I love that you feel like you get an arc of the player's season, even though we're just kind of hopping in, seeing these moments from the different games. When you said PD, that's what it made me think of that. You kind of just feel their arc within the game itself, within the movie itself, even though you're watching these brief little moments across several different games.
Something I noticed from just their choice of shot selection was a lot of films now, you got to like have the wide sweeping shots, see a massive crowd filling up a stadium, all those big jib shots and stuff. No, all of this was really tight angles, tight shots. You could kind of see they could do a lot of this practical because they only needed enough people to fill in kind of in the background, or it was just the way they shot it was very intimate, very close. And the way that they cut around everything was, you never felt like, oh no, this is low budget by any means, but it was very, you didn't have that level where you're back out and you go, oh, this kind of feels cheap, or like we're getting this fake kind of feel to it. It's like, no, all of this felt very real. Like when we're seeing people, not just like digitally altered people, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, of just like the more practical, the better. But I thought that was interesting, just seeing the very tight choices of angles and shots for all of this stuff. Then it kind of gave me not claustrophobic, but really tight, like you're right in the middle of it.
Yes. I think a lot of the gameplay, you feel like you're in the huddle with them, and the camera angle is.
It's not like crazy up from top high. It's like, no, I'm literally like if I was walking past, or I was on the field, like as a ref nearby.
I'm one of the players, yeah. And then you get in the in-between shots some more kind of steady, more established shots that kind of just slow that pace down a little bit, which I wonder if it's the contrast with those that kind of helps those game scenes feel that much more intense with it all.
Can we spend a little moment of just like being fans of Hayden Panettiere and how she steals almost every single scene that she's in, even though she's six in this film?
You're kind of annoyed with her, but then you aren't. Yeah. Like it works, but the best part though is she's like, a bratty little girl, but you love her. You're endeared to her.
And I don't even know if bratty's the right word. She just like loves football so much, more than anybody else in this entire film does. She cares so deeply. And I think that's probably the fan in us where like, this is how I feel when I watch the Colts lose another game and Andrew Luck doesn't come back and I feel heartbroken. But even how she's like trying to like tell the coach like what to do. He's like, you need to do that. And she like gives him a compliment. It's like, you done good, coach. And he's like, wow, I've never been given compliment by a 6-year-old. I'm 12. But her relationship and the dichotomy between her and the coach's daughter is great. Every time they're together and she just wants to play with dolls and she just wants to play football and watch game film. I love those interactions. And the girl has such great one-liners when she's like, are all white girls this crazy? Like, I just love all of those like little moments and just like how it's like, yes, this girl is way crazier, like way different than like the normal, just like Midwestern girl or Southern girl or whatever.
I like that you bring her up, because I think one of the interesting choices that they made in this movie was making her the narrator.
Yep.
And that you only really get her as the narrator at the very beginning and at the very end.
That is an interesting choice.
It's a very interesting choice. And I thought about that. I wonder if that was
Does it work, or is it kind of odd, strange?
I like it. I like it. I like that we start at the funeral and you don't know who the funeral is for. And she sets the tone from there, because immediately you know, okay, this is not a Disney comedy sports film. This is going to be serious. This is going to be moving. This is going to pull at you emotionally. It kind of sets that tone immediately. But then the way it comes around at the end, it is somber, but you don't end on a somber note. It becomes a very celebratory moment, especially when you realize that it's Bertier's funeral and that, you're kind of at this reunion of the Titans. I felt like it worked for me. I just thought it was a unique choice to kind of make her the narrator of this.
The thing is, though, I think for me, I think you're right on the setup, but it almost felt like they should have carried that through. It did give it the sense of, hey, this is a story, almost like a fable kind of feeling to it. But I forgot about it until the very, very end. Like after we were in, like I'm in, and I'm like, shouldn't we have had more of this?
But I wonder if, subtly, that's what makes her character work so well throughout the movie, is because you kind of tucked that back in the back of your mind, she's the thread through all of this. Because even if you watch her arc, she is the arc of the movie, of the whole community, of the whole team, of the whole school. And her arc really helps you see, in a more comical way, because she's definitely got some more lighthearted moments, but then some more serious moments. You see, she is a representative of the whole story.
Eddie, you nailed it. Nailed it on the head. I didn't even see that before.
I love this movie. And as I came to the end of it, and I'm not even gotten to one of my favorite parts of this whole movie. So, and we will get there. But before we get there, I got to the end of this viewing and I felt like I don't know what I would change. Like, I feel like this is an almost, if not totally perfect movie.
I couldn't even think of anything either. And I've been trying to reinvestigate it in my head. Not necessarily what I would change, but
it's just tight. It's got the pacing is so well done. You've got a large cast, but you don't get lost. You're not confused about who's who. They zoom in and zoom out when is necessary. I'm
a little confused. So looking at little maybe that's where we're at, nitpicks on this. I don't know if, and maybe this is just because this is 2000. If they made this film today, it'd be different. But with the California kid, the kid from California, they didn't totally, and maybe that was the idea of like make it a ambiguous thing. But the kiss that he does that he has with one of the other players and kind of freaks him out.
Yeah.
It's never really like clarified. Was this supposed to be just a joking thing, or was this really supposed to be something else underneath it? I think if they did this today, they would have been a lot more blunt with that than they were. There was some of that level of, and was this just a joke, or was this actually who this character is? They didn't really clear some of that up, and I didn't know if you had kind of felt the same thing.
No, I didn't feel it, because I think you have that moment where he comes to Bertier, I think it's at the end of camp or whatever, and he's just like, "We're all good, man." He's like, "Yeah, we're all good." And I just kind of felt like that is the resolution of whatever that was, maybe more of it being more of kind of a joke. But I think that's why this works as a 2000 film and wouldn't work as a 2022 film.
They'd have to go.
I think if it was made today, you're going to have to
have an LGBTQ character. You'd have to.
And it's not even just about having the character. My bigger thing there is this story stands on its own. Don't preach it to me. Don't explain to me why this story works. Just tell
Don't
me
explain the joke.
Good. Exactly.
Maybe that's just because I've gotten so maybe conditioned I don't know if conditioned is the right word, but I've got conditioned to have more of these kind of scenarios. There's got to be like a, hey, I need to come out and tell you the truth moment kind of near the end. Like, hey, actually, I really am this. Like, I've just been so, especially for Disney, having just those kind of moments become more, hey, you got to at least come out at some point to somebody in here. And I think maybe that's where it's like, I've been trying to put my lens of this was 2000. This was 22 years ago. Crazy to think about now.
Wow, it is really crazy to think that was over 2 decades ago that this came out. But yeah, I don't know. I just doubled down on that of the movies coming out today. I feel like I'm okay with directors having a point of view and a movie having a point of view and wanting to say something. Don't preach it at me. Don't shove it down my throat. Don't explain it to me so heavy. Don't have things in there just for the sake of having something in there. No, it's got to be, at the end of the day, it's a movie. It's got to be a good story, well told. It's got to be characters that I care about. Yeah. And I think that's why no matter what, this movie feels so perfect, like just across the board, is I care about these characters deeply. The story is compelling and it's moving. You've got amazing actors. It's well shot, well edited. And I'm going to get to the moment. Here it is. Arguably the best movie soundtrack. Like, so stinking good. Like, well-written score, but then the record drops in this, like the needle drops in this are so good. Like, that was the other thing about this movie that I remember so distinctly is buying this soundtrack and listening to it on CD over and over, because you get Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Spirit in the Sky, Peace Train, so many other really great needle drops in here. But then the score itself, Titans' Spirit, took a life of its own, right? Like, the historic nomination and election of President Barack Obama, they used this for everything. This was the score of his nomination and being sworn in, his victory speech and his election night win. This was playing under all of those moments. And I remember those so distinctly going, wait, they're using the Remember the Titans theme. This is perfect. Like, this just fits really well, not just because of the story content, but because of the music. It is so stirring. It feels historic when you listen to it on its own. So to me, also the score and the soundtrack it's just perfect. The song selection throughout this movie just comes at the right moment. Oh, this is such a great song. I mean, it also helps that the era that they're in is arguably the best era of popular music, but that's for another podcast. Another episode.
When you didn't even hit on the viral warm-up song, the We Are the Titans, Mighty Titans, that probably every high school in America cribbed and used for themselves at some point that year, or like for about half a decade, everybody was using that warm up and at least the chant themselves.
In some capacity, in some different way, for sure. Was there any suspense left in what this gets rated?
I think we're there. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, Eddie. We still got more things.
Oh, you've got more.
I got more. I mean, we've gone this entire thing without talking about what the majority of this film, until like basically the last third isn't about this, but the majority of this film is about the race struggle in America, specifically at that time. And to not even spend any time on it would be like we didn't even watch the film. It's funny.
Oh, I felt like we had touched it. Sorry.
It's funny watching it and being like, maybe it's because I was 14, 15 when I first saw this film. But it's funny to say, but it's true for me. I forgot the level of that it dealt with race, and it's the entire, especially the first 2/3 of this film. It's not really that. It's not as much of a sports movie as it is constantly having the battle between in this community and seeing the progression of it. It's funny that like it just like more wide-eyed to me now, being so much older than I was at the time and having more experiences and hearing more stories. But it's just interesting, like how even despite that, even though it's like, let's sit down and watch a movie about race, like don't know how excited a lot of people are to do that when most people are trying to have a lean back experience and just sit and be entertained. But it's crazy to have a movie so heavily about that, yet carry you along so well and so delicate, not even delicate, like at times it was kind of right up in your face, but I never felt, like you said, preached at. And I think probably because one of the best moments in this is that level of just a whole friendship side of things. Like that is where people kind of came together, is when they really became united. And as friends, as people who actually wanted to be around each other, not just I understand you, let's move on, which is what a lot of the times they were just like, let's just get the facts and just move on. But there was an actual kinship of friendship. That's why when they're in the hospital at the end, it's so heartbreaking when Julius finally comes into the hospital to be there with him. It's
well, that's the moment. That's the moment I lose it.
Start losing it. Yep.
Ugly cry, right?
Oh, ugly cry.
No.
The comment and his comment. That's my brother. Don't you see the family resemblance?
See the family resemblance. No, so the thing that I do remember, you had asked about watching this for the first time. I think the what stands out to me was this facilitated a conversation with my parents, because my parents grew up in this era and were a part of the desegregation. You know, they saw it happening in their schools.
Oh, wow.
And it facilitated the conversation of me. You know, I mean, I was aware of some of these things, but definitely not to the degree that one should be. You know, I think that's what good storytelling should do, is draw you in to help make you aware of something that otherwise you would be ignorant of.
When you don't have that personal experience yourself. Yep.
I mean, in many ways, it's for me, it's akin to, in what would that have been? Maybe 5th grade when we read Numbering the Stars.
Yep.
And that was the first real introduction that I had to the Holocaust.
Oh, yeah.
And you had this incredible story about this young girl. And you're taking a very, you know, those are two very, I mean, they're two tragedies on you know, pretty severe levels being shared in very intimate, specific ways through a very a special story that I think has a way of explaining, showing something that happened in a way that you feel it, that you understand it. Maybe another film that gets close to this would be The Help. I love that movie. It's got a very of the same topic, but just from a different perspective. Incredible characters, amazing story, so well delivered. You know, that you feel the same. The long struggle for reconciliation, for the long struggle for restoration is really the better way of putting that. Of like, even though we had put off the bounds of such a grievous sin, there was, you know, a sin that great is going to have natural consequences and lasting pain that, you know, 100 years later, they were still, working through it in such grievous ways.
Yep.
And this movie has a powerful way of helping you feel the long restoration of such a grievous sin.
Awesome. That's really good. I don't have anything to follow up on that because that was a good. Almost like you do this.
Did I get a little going?
Yeah, you did.
It's almost like I do this for a living. No, I this is good art. This is what good art should do.
Yep.
Great storytelling should stir our attention, our affections to greater things, to better things.
See, Eddie, you weren't done. You weren't ready to rate this yet. You needed to. We could have missed this moment. We could have missed this moment.
So that everybody can hear me pontificating wildly.
That's what we need. We need more pontificating. You don't get this when you're listening to the Mr. Magoo episode. Because there's just nothing.
Well, there you go. There you go. And maybe this is why this stands out to us so much is not every movie is going to be this is going to be Remember the Titans. And that's why there's going to be others that we follow up with on this list that are good, that are decent sports movies, but just doesn't rise to the same level as this.
Like Air Bud.
Like Air Bud. But I mean, I also, okay, The Rookie, it's a good movie, but it doesn't get to this level. Not at all. Miracle's a good movie, and it kind of tugs at some good patriotic moments and speaks to what was going on in the next decade in the 70s, but you're not anywhere near the same level. Mainly because the subject matter is so heavy in this one. It's such a serious subject matter.
When you get great football, like actual accurate football, other than the fact that they said 15 more yards, that's not a real penalty. Sorry, but you don't get 15 extra yards for stuff. You only get one penalty on there. Then you got Denzel, get the Denzel effect, automatically skyrockets it. Great supporting cast along with it. And then great writing, great storytelling, but then you also got a great subject matter in that kind of takes it to a whole nother level. And all of this is why I'm giving this 5 gummy worms.
Right there with you. It's a resounding 5 gummy worms. Yeah. I feel like I've said it all. I've poured it all out there. This might be one of those movies that, we might have to do another Mount Rushmore, and this would definitely be on the Mount Rushmore for the
2000s,
for the aughts,
for 5 years of 2000s that we'll cover before we someday end this podcast.
Do you know what you call the first decade? Because you've got the teens and the 20s and the 30s. It's the aughts.
I knew you'd know this. I knew you would have this at the tip of your tongue.
We were both in The Music Man. It's brought up in The Music Man. I learned it from being in The Music Man. I distinctly remember that moment.
What do you talk about? We talk about the
1900s and the aughts.
Talk all you want. But it's different. No, it ain't. But you gotta know the territory.
See, I don't remember lyrics. I'm surprised because
I only know that you were in that scene though. Were you in that scene?
No.
The opening scene of Music Man?
No, I wasn't.
See, that's why. Once you had to learn it all and be in it, other than John. Right. Poor John never could get... Wait, you talk, you can bicker, and it just always fell apart with him. I'm sorry, man. Still trying to get over that. The rest of us had it, but...
I was the constable. You were one of the salesmen.
Minor role, minor character in that, but
both.
My sister was Maid Marian, so she.
That's right.
Living her best life
this is not about this.
The Music Man.
It's a resounding 5 gummy worms from both of us for what we would term a Disney classic in Remember the Titans. And with that, your life has been forever changed by another episode of this classic, Honey, We Made a Disney Podcast.
Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your other favorite podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a 5-star review Or you can, even better, go in there, click on the little share button, send this link over to one of your best friends who you think would also like this podcast.
You can also check us out at honeywemade.com, where you can see our full movie list as we continue to go through all the Disney movies that came out in our childhood, 1988 to 2005, including next week's episode when we will review 102 Dalmatians.
Another round of Glenn Close. Thank you for listening. And remember, Eddie, you're Hall of Fame in my book. And you listeners are also Hall of Fame as well.